Welcome back. There's new polling by NBC News. It's shedding light on what the American people would like to see Congress act on. According to the survey, immigration issues top the list, with 80% saying Congress should set up paths for undocumented immigrants who meet certain requirements. 72% said lawmakers also need to increase border security.
To highlight some of the issues taking place right now at our border, here's News Nation's Ali Bradley.
This human smuggling effort along our southern border is really a well-oiled, sophisticated machine here. And it's the U.S. citizens who are really doing the heavy lifting here, transporting undocumented individuals further into the interior of the country. And we witnessed this firsthand as we rode along exclusively with the Cochise County Sheriff's Criminal Interdiction Team. And this is what we found.
So I would have paid my rent and gotten my car fixed.
Call it desperate times, a means to an end. A highly illegal means ending in handcuffs for this U.S. citizen.
I got your back.
Facing up to 12 and a half years in jail for Class 2 felony charges.
They told me to download an app called Telegram, I think it was.
A simple response to a social media posting. From there, it's as easy as a pin drop.
They sent me a pin to Sierra Vista.
The pickup is made and the evasion begins. U.S. citizens acting as smugglers, circumventing the recently reopened checkpoints in Arizona with the promise of being paid between $500 and $1,000 per head when they get to their destination.
I don't know if it's like digital or like cash.
15 vehicles involving human smuggling were stopped in one day in the county.
There is no age limitation. It's 13. We caught a 67-year-old just last week.
Hola.
News Nation was there as deputies thwarted 9 different smuggling attempts in just 4 hours. During one of those stops in below freezing conditions,
I got him.
an undocumented individual seemingly appears out of nowhere. You see him get hung up here on the barbed wire before self-surrendering to officials on scene. Like other smugglers, this driver from Tucson,
I feel like I've ruined my life.
says he learned about daily work for easy money in an Instagram post.
I was recently let go from my job at Amazon, and I had no way to pay for a daycare or any bills.
He says he communicated with his, quote, boss for 3 days on WhatsApp.
He said that it's just a transportation job from point A to point B. Told me where to go.
Picking them up outside of what he says was a stash house. His case was turned over to Border Patrol, who will decide whether to press federal charges. The Cochise County Sheriff's Office nabbing 1,578 people for state border-related crimes like smuggling last year. 1,500 of them were U.S. citizens carrying out the illegal activity, even some younger than legal driving age.
To see the cartels backfeeding crime to these kids, come down here, we'll give you $3,000, come to Cochise County per person. That seems so simple, seems so innocent when it's international crime.
What would you tell someone who's considering doing this, who finds this ad that you found and thinks this is a good idea?
Just don't do it and stay straight.
Yeah, and the sheriff telling us here that he currently has at least 9 juveniles in his jail sitting there waiting for their court hearings in connection to human smuggling charges. In Naco, Arizona, Ali Bradley for News Nation.
So one of the fascinating parts of Ali's piece was she brought up this human smuggling scenario or situation happening in Arizona and along the border. And she says, according to her reporting, it's essentially done by more U.S. citizens. I mean, what have you found in that way?
It's a great piece because of that. A lot of the border security components are being basically shopped out to U.S. citizens. U.S. citizens conducting illegal behavior, either not knowing what they're doing or not knowing the gravity of what they're doing or not knowing until they're actually doing it, until they have migrants in their car. Yeah. So it's a very complicated border security scenario, especially in counties like Cochise that are very sparsely populated. There's a lot of desert. There's a lot of space for things to go wrong. And her source in the story, the Cochise County Sheriff's Department, is itself pretty polarizing. Immigration advocates do not like Sheriff Daniel. And Republicans do like him to the point that he was one of the chief witnesses at the House Judiciary Committee's hearings on immigration. But Sheriff Daniel is actually, he's fighting the same border security battle that sheriffs all over the border are. But he does have a perspective that really rankles the left on the immigration debate.
How is this going to impact, do you think, the situation going into 2024? Because Republicans were really aggressive on it in 2022, but it seemed that that issue didn't really permeate or get through to voters. Maybe it was because there were other issues at play, like economy, like abortion, like candidate quality, for example. But it seems like they have an opportunity at the border.
So immigration is rarely the number one issue, even for immigrant communities. The economy, education, healthcare are usually those top issues for obvious reasons, because those affect the daily lives of people. But immigration is starting to get to this point of frustration. Congress has been pretty much inactive on the issue for, it depends on who you ask, but at least 30 years, which is enough for a major issue. So the battle lines are kind of being drawn in that Republicans, for the most part, with big exceptions, but for the most part, want to deal with immigration, asylum, border, and fentanyl. Border security and fentanyl. They want to deal with that in one big package. They say it's all part of the same issue. And Democrats, they say, well, you need different solutions to these very different but correlated problems. So that's sort of where the battle lines are being drawn, and the fight that we'll see. There are a few Republicans who are very keen on the immigration issue. Like I talked to Tony Gonzalez, who represents a third of the U.S.-Mexico border, so he would know. He thinks anybody who conflates these issues, who wants to deal with them together, just doesn't understand the issues. So we're up for a pretty big fight, and I think in a Congress that's not very expected to be as productive as the last one because it is divided, this might be sort of the fight where, like, well, it really is where they're going to do the trench fighting. But conditions are different than they ever have been before. And who knows, that might be the formula for some progress.
Yeah. Well, let's hope there's some progress because, like I said, we talk about it so much. And with such a focus on immigration, it appears views have not really changed from last year, when an NPR survey found that a majority of Americans believe it's either somewhat or completely true that the United States is experiencing an invasion at the southern border.
So earlier in the show, we spoke with Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger of Virginia. Here's what she had to say about addressing these issues.
How do we have a system that works where people who want to apply for asylum because they actually need asylum can do it? People who want to come here to work, be it temporarily or potentially permanently, can do it? That we as a country know who's coming in, that we can do it we can process people through, we can have some level of accountability and clarity, right? But at the same time, we can decouple the discussions of people and humanity and workers and families from the very real truth that indeed there are transnational criminal organizations that are trafficking fentanyl and making billions of dollars a year trafficking vulnerable people. If we can get at fixing those issues, right, which is reforming our immigration process, how we let people in, how we process people, and the number of visas we make available, and we have honest conversations about the fact that we have real challenges with our border security. We need to continue investing in additional technologies. We need to recognize that the X-ray machines of 30 years ago are just not cutting it anymore.
So Abigail Spanberger seems to be, pretty middle of the road on this issue, very much addressing both sides, saying, look, we need to be a welcoming nation to immigrants, especially those obviously seeking asylum. But at the same time, she's addressing the very real issues at the southern border, like fentanyl, something I hear so many Republican lawmakers talk about. How much is Spanberger's view and her rhetoric on this, heard within the Democratic Party, or is she more, would you say, to the right on this than most Democrats are?
So Democrats were more divided on this cadre of issues when they were in power in the House. Now that they are the minority, they're more united, and the big fight is what Spanberger is saying, that we have to deal with these things separately. We have to deal with fentanyl as a domestic problem with a very big border component. We have to deal, which she did actually in legislation last year. We have to deal with legal immigration by opening up more visas, so people who want to come here and work can, have a place to apply, really. And we need to deal with asylum as a separate issue for people who really need asylum protections, not necessarily economic migrants. Now, as she said, some Republicans do agree with this view. The mainstream Republicans don't agree with that view right now, but I think at this point, basically all Democrats, if they get a chance to do it the way Spanberger is suggesting in this interview, they'll take it.
Right, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for joining us on What America's Thinking. We'll see you next time.